Thank you. Thank you, Chris, very much. Thanks to all of you for coming. I want to begin by saying what a privilege it is to be here, hosted by the Infosys Science Foundation and by the Murthy family. I also had the privilege of serving on the jury for the Social Science Prize, the Infosys Foundation Social Science Prize. And when I arrived here, I learned about the launch of the new prize in the humanities, which I think is a wonderful addition to the Infosys Science Foundation prizes that I think will go a long way towards signaling the importance of the humanities to students, I think especially to students in India, bringing the importance of humane learning and the liberal arts to bear on Indian education and on the aspirations of Indian students. So I would like to give a special thanks to the Murthy family and to Mr. Murthy and also to Rohan, who instigated all of this. So thank you to them and thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you. The excerpt you just saw is an excerpt of the series of lectures that has just begun to air on NDTV. And what I'd like to do today is to engage you, we're an intimate group, in a discussion of justice, of what's the right thing to do. The subject I teach now is political philosophy. I tried to learn political philosophy starting when I was a freshman in college, and I didn't do very well. They gave us these books by famous philosophers, Plato, Aristotle. I found them hard, abstract, distant, remote from the things I cared about, so I put them aside and didn't really come back to political philosophy until graduate school. When I began teaching the course on justice, I wanted to design a course that would have interested me back when I was a college student. A course that connects the big ideas of the philosophers with the lives we live, with the debates we have in public life, and with the dilemmas we encounter in our everyday lives. So I would like to give you a lecture on different ways of thinking about justice, but not really by way of lecturing, by way of putting some questions to you. And I'd like to begin with one. It's a hypothetical story. I want to see what you think about it. Are you ready? Now, you know we have people with microphones in the aisle, so I'm going to call on people to see what you think, including those of you in the balcony. Imagine that you are the driver of a trolley car, and the trolley car or the train is hurtling down the track at 60 miles an hour, and you see at the end of the track are 5 workers. You try to stop, but you can't. Your brakes don't work. You're about to crash into them, and you know, let's assume, you know that if you do, they will all die, all 5. You're in despair until you notice there is a side track, and on that track there is 1 worker working. You could turn the trolley car onto the side track, the steering wheel works, and if you did, you will kill 1 worker, but not the 5. So here's our first question. What would you do? What is the right thing to do? Let's first take a show of hands. How many would turn the trolley car onto the side track? Raise your hand. And how many would not? How many would go straight ahead? Quite a few. The majority, though, would turn. let's hear first from the majority. Why would you turn? Who will give us a reason? Yes.
First up, I would like to say that human life is of paramount importance. That's a given. So if given a choice of turning the trolley towards the one person instead of hitting on the five,
Right.
I would go with the one which has a higher order of doing to the betterment of the society. As in, 5 people will have a better chance of contributing towards the betterment of the society than the one person. So I would choose to crash onto the one person and save the 5 people.
You would choose to crash into the one and spare the 5.
Right.
Because that will contribute the most to society. You will kill 1 rather than 5.
Right.
All right, and tell us your name.
Muzam.
Muzam?
Yeah.
All right. So those of you who voted to turn, was it for the reason Muzam just gave us? It's a terrible dilemma, but better that 1 should die so that 5 should live. Is that more or less the reason that people had who voted that way? Yes? All right, now let's hear from someone who would not turn. Why would you not turn? Yes, in the balcony.
The gentleman that explained the reasons of why he will turn about human life being important. The train was supposed to go in one direction because of some reasons. If you divert and then take the side turn, you don't know what are the other hidden things that you don't know. So then you might be impacting the people on the train as well. So that is one reason why I would rather go straight and instead of diverting, because there might be other train coming on the other side turn and all those things, which we don't know too many things. Too many unknowns out there.
All right, stand up. I can't tell who's... Oh, there you are. Okay, yeah. Right.
So there are too many unknowns there for me to take the risk and impact the people on the train. That might be leading to a lot more fatality of people on the train as well.
But let's assume that we know for sure that all 5 will die if you go crashing into them. You would still do it?
Yes.
And the reason you would do it, when you could save those 5 and kill only 1?
Those 5 people knew that there will be a train coming that side. Whereas
They knew that there would be a train coming?
Yeah.
No, they didn't know that. They were just working there. They were workers. Their job was not to be crashed into if the brakes failed. Their job was just to fix the track.
There are too many unknowns, unfortunately, for me to take the decision of taking the turn. The train might not take the right turn correctly or things like that. And
for you to take the decision to take the turn, what, the train might not go with you?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, let's say that it would go with you. Anyone? Yes, what would you say? You also would not turn?
Yes, I also would not turn because what I feel here is that the train was supposed to go on that path only where those 5 people were there.
Well, wait, let me ask you about that. And that we heard that a moment ago too. The train was supposed to go on that track into the 5 people?
Yes, that's what I think. See,
but wait a minute. When you say it was supposed to go along that track into the 5 people, what do you mean? The train it was fated to do that? It was scheduled to do that? What do you mean?
Maybe yes. It was scheduled to go that way only. And the other person who was on the side track, if we turn the train, what I think is that he didn't do anything wrong to be hit by the train.
Right, the one guy did not do anything wrong, but the 5 people didn't do anything wrong.
No, what I am assuming here is that the train had a fixed path, and if some people are already there, even if they know or they don't know that the train is coming, then it's something that is supposed to happen. And the other
supposed to happen. But this is what I'm trying to understand. It's supposed, you mean those 5 people, though they didn't know it, when they woke up in the morning that day, somewhere it was decided that they were supposed to be crashed into?
Maybe yes.
Yes?
Yeah, that's what I think.
Maybe, okay, all right. So in a way, both of the people who would go straight ahead feel that there is some element of of fate.
Yeah.
The fate of those 5 was just set. The train schedule didn't say that the train today will crash into those 5, but in some larger way that seems to be, well, fated somehow. Let's take another version of the trolley car case and see whether the majority will stick to the principle of 1 life rather than 5. This time you're not the driver of a trolley car. You are an onlooker standing on a bridge overlooking a trolley car track. And down the track comes the train. At the end of the track are the same 5 workers. This time there's no side track. And you're just watching. So you really feel helpless as you see this train about to crash into the 5, knowing its brakes don't work. You feel helpless until you notice that standing next to you on the bridge is a very heavy man. And you realize that if you pushed him, he would go onto the track, block the train, and save the 5. He would die, but the 5 would live. Sacrificing 1 life to save 5. Moaz, what do you say? How many, well, we'll take the vote first. How many would push the heavy man onto the track? Raise your hand. Raise so I can count. I only see about a dozen people who would put, well, over here there are a lot of people who would put, all right, 20 in all. How many would not push? How many think it would be wrong to push? Well, the vast majority. But here's the obvious question. In the first case, almost everyone agreed that it's better to sacrifice 1 life in order to save 5. In the second case, don't we have exactly the same principle? And here almost everyone who supported that principle in the first case abandons it in the second. Why? Who can explain the difference between these cases? Who else?
You'll be tried for homicide in the second case.
You tried for well, but should you be? See, what we're trying to figure out is what the law should be. Should the law treat these 2 cases the same way or differently? Oh, someone here? Yeah.
I think it's the same dilemma that people associate with aircraft pilots and soldiers on the ground. Killing someone face to face is treated differently from doing it from a distance. So if you're in a train, if you're the driver of the train and you choose to do something, it's different from having to do it yourself, having to push someone off the bridge. I think there's that amount of dissociation.
So there's a closer association with
Yeah.
killing if you're pushing someone.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just turning onto a side track and unfortunately the person dies, it's different.
And also, I think it's the way society treats authority or the amount of, so if you're the driver of the train, you have the choice to turn the train. If you're an onlooker, I think it would be treated differently if you push someone onto a track.
Well, maybe you would be treated differently by the law, but our question
Yeah.
is, should the law treat you differently?
No.
No? Someone said no. Who was that? Who disagreed? And wait, before you get and tell us your name.
Pratyusha?
Pratisha? Okay. And who disagrees?
That was me.
All right. Why? Tell us
So
why.
in both cases, it's the person making the choice of killing another person. So I don't see any difference in changing the circumstances. It's eventually 1 against 5. And
I mean, you could always try to shout and warn the 5, but if you know that your actions can save the 5 in some way, I would take it any day.
So I want to make sure I understand. You voted in the first case to turn,
Yep.
and in the second case to push.
Yes.
And you think that there's a consistent principle, sacrifice 1 to save 5,
Exactly.
that applies equally in both cases.
Of course. I mean,
Tell us
even though in the first case I can blame it on the train for malfunctioning, it's still my choice. I chose to
Right.
kill the one person. And even here I can, I mean, if no one else is witnessing, I can just say he tripped and fell.
And
Right.
so you're making a choice both ways.
No, I'm just saying that in both cases,
Yes.
I can get away from the moral responsibility of killing a person by blaming it on circumstances. In the first case, I can say it was the train which malfunctioned, and in the second, I can say he tripped.
Yeah. Oh, he tripped. He tripped.
I mean, I'm just giving people a choice to evade the law. But yeah, eventually, the moral choice is the same.
All right.
On life against 5.
All right, and tell us your name.
Shashank.
And let's hear a reply. Most people disagree. But it's 1 life versus 5, isn't it? We've heard the argument that somehow it's more personal pushing. Is there any other argument that can distinguish those? Yes.
Yeah, I think it would not have been right for him to take the turn in the initial, in the first case. But if he had taken the turn, then I'm sure he should be treated in a different way than the person who was pushing. Because if he had taken the turn, he had probably taken a decision that it was easier for one person to get off the track than 5 people to get off the track. And hence he decided to take the turn. Whereas in the second case, he is deliberately pushing someone with the clear knowledge that he is going to die.
Deliberately pushing someone with the knowledge he's going to die. But we have to assume in the first case, to make this question a hard question, that a person will not jump off the track. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that when you turn in the first case, you know that person is going to die as surely as you know when you push. In both cases, there could be, in real life, a lucky contingency that the person survives. But let's assume in both cases, the person will die. Then?
Well, I think there is an element of subjectivity. In the first case, there is a man in action who has to take a decision, like a soldier or a general in the army. In the second case, this guy is not a man in action, he's an onlooker. So, I mean...
Well, he is an onlooker, but then the person working on the side track, he wasn't there to sacrifice, he wasn't a soldier there to sacrifice his life. He was just working on the track.
Okay.
What about that?
So that was my point.
Now, there is... Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that in the second case, I think as an onlooker, I would like to basically ask myself a question, would I jump and save that life?
Aha, would you jump? Would you jump rather than
Rather
push?
than push, then it's a different matter. But, pushing someone, I feel, is certainly not my idea of, justice and saving 5 lives.
Right, but you think the noble thing to do would be to jump oneself rather than to push. Well, it might work, but let's suppose, to put it delicately, that only a person of very substantial girth would do the job.
Yeah, but that's, I think, the question I'm asking. Would you do it? So if you are not prepared to jump off, then how would you like to push someone else?
I see. So suppose I think to myself, I would jump, but I'm a little bit too slender to achieve the purpose. But since I would do it, and here's someone who's available who will get the job done. No? That wouldn't justify? And in the first case, what did you do in the first case?
Well, in the first case, I think it's a split-second decision,
Well, here
As a
you have to
driver.
decide fast too.
No,
Quick push.
As a driver of the trolley, I need to take a quick decision. Do I go ahead and kill 5, or do I, take a chance and divert this train and hope that, the one person might jump out of the way, or does
Well, we can hope in both cases. We can hope that after you push and the guy stops the train, he survives.
Yeah, but I think, a deliberate homicidal gesture to me is not justice.
A homicidal gesture. But turning and crashing into someone, that's not a homicidal gesture.
Well, it's helpless homicide, I would say.
Yeah, Rohan.
Actually, I have a question for people who say 1 is better than 5, especially in the first case. Now imagine that one person at the end of the track who you choose to turn and kill is your son or daughter. Would you still do it? Does the principle still then apply?
Even in the first case. Never mind the pushing.
Primarily in the first case, yeah.
Yeah. And for you, before we put it to the group?
No, I have no answer.
You wouldn't, it would be unimaginable to turn into a family member.
I think I would live by the principle that's become quite common in this country. That's the principle of inaction and not do anything.
Which All right, would it make a difference, those of you, 1 versus 5, would it make a difference if the one were a family member? We'll test draw. How many would, if the one were a family member, in the first case, not pushing, just turning, how many would turn? Even over there? Very few. We only got about 5 people. So when it comes to a family member, then suddenly numbers don't seem to count anymore. I'm not even going to repeat that. What if it were a friend? Friend the same as how many would turn knowing it was a friend there? So the personal connection seems to make a big difference. It overrides numbers. Suppose it weren't just 5, Rohan. Suppose there were 100 in a family member. Or suppose it were a question of a battle, a strategically important battle, and you were a general. Well, what this case, now this is a purely hypothetical case. Sometimes philosophers use these cases to identify principles. And what this case shows is the clash between 2 different ways of thinking about justice. One way of thinking about justice, and it goes back to the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham, says the right thing to do is whatever will maximize pleasure or happiness, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That's the utilitarian idea of justice. And it seemed to have some moral weight when it involved turning. Sacrifice 1 to save 5. Numbers count. The second case seemed to challenge the utilitarian way of thinking about justice. Somehow, most people felt it was just wrong, categorically wrong, to push that person, even to save 5. Which means there must be another principle of justice beyond the utilitarian one that most people find persuasive. It must have something to do with respecting people's rights. Thinking now the man on the bridge. Even if it means 5 will die. This second way of thinking about justice, regarding certain duties and rights as categorically important regardless of numbers. It goes back to the German philosopher, 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant. And it's also found in other philosophies. There are certain categorical duties and rights that outweigh the numbers. And then we actually had I think, the intimation maybe of a third way of thinking about justice when Rohan introduced the question of family and the relation between the people, which is neither the utilitarian idea nor the Kantian idea of categorical duties and rights. Because think about it, if the one person on the bridge, if the 5 people included your child, then you'd go for them. So it's not numbers, it's not categorical duties and rights. It's something to do with familial ties, maybe solidarity. Maybe justice has something to do with solidarity, or, and we'd have to explore this more fully, or is that just a kind of prejudice we have for our family and our loved ones? Does morality require us to step back from our prejudices? That's a big debate among philosophers. So we have at least 2 principles and possibly a third. I'd like now to put to you another tradition of justice that says justice isn't about maximizing utility, it's not about respecting categorical duties and rights. It's about honoring and recognizing and promoting virtue. And to illustrate this theory of justice, I want to give you a very brief lecture on Aristotle from ancient Greece, who advanced this theory of justice. Are you ready for the lecture about Aristotle? According to Aristotle, justice means giving people what they deserve. That's it. That's the lecture. Now, you may find that disappointing. Well, who would disagree with that? Don't the hard questions begin when it comes to figuring out who deserves what and why? Suppose we're distributing flutes. Who should get the best one, the best flute? What would you say? Anybody, you can just shout out. Who? The person who plays best? Person who makes it. The what? You said the person who's the best flute player should get the best flute. Stand up and tell us why you think that. We'll get you a microphone.
I think the person who plays best knows how to use the best flute and would make the most use of it. So he would deserve the best flute.
Would make the best use of it, really knows how to use the flute, would get the most out of it. And why is that a reason that he should have it, that he deserves it?
Otherwise, there will be wastage of resources.
Yeah, a waste of a good flute if it were given to a poor musician. Well, actually, that's Aristotle's answer too. He agrees with you.
Okay.
He thinks the best flutes should go to the best flute players. Now, there are 2 reasons you might think that. One reason is because the best flute players will play the best music, and that will make everyone well off. We like to hear good flute music. Is that your reason or not exactly?
No, that was not my
Okay,
reason.
you had a different, all right, this is interesting. So there is a utilitarian reason for giving the best flutes to the best flute players, so that the society as a whole will benefit hearing the best music. But you had a different reason, and your reason actually is Aristotle's reason. That's what flutes are for, to be played well. And if it's given to someone who can't play it well, you're wasting the potential, the purpose of a flute. Mm. That's very good. Have you read Aristotle already?
No.
No? Well, that's his idea. What's your name?
Pallavi.
Say it again.
Pallavi.
Pallavi? That's very good. All right, now, this idea that the best flute should go to the best flute player because that's what flutes are for, this in a way, is a strange idea. Because it says in order to decide how to distribute things, we have to ask what is the purpose or the point or the nature, Aristotle used the Greek term, the telos, of the thing, in this case a flute. Now the purpose of a flute may not be all that controversial, to be played well, of course. But when we're talking about the distribution of other goods in the society, it may not be obvious or uncontroversial what the purpose of the social practice is. If we're talking about how to allocate seats in a university, for example, people disagree. What is the point, the essential nature of a university? Or, well, take sports. Let me give you another example. Not about flutes, but about golf. There was a dispute about justice involving golf in the US. It involved a golfer who was a very good golfer, but he had a bad leg, a congenital circulatory disease, and if he had to walk long distances, it was extremely painful, and it posed risk that he could injure the leg. His name was Casey Martin. Did anyone ever hear of him? A few people. So Casey Martin, who was otherwise a great golfer, asked the Professional Golfers Association for the right to use a golf cart in the tournaments. And they said no. It's against the rules. You've got to walk if you want to play. And he sued. He took the case to court, to the federal courts, and believe it or not, it went all the way up to the US Supreme Court. This case about whether this golfer should be able to use a golf cart. Now, before I tell you what the court said, if you were the judge, and you were judging from the standpoint of fairness, how would you decide? The law that he appealed, under which he appealed, was a law called the Americans with Disabilities Act that said you've got to provide accommodations for the disabled, provided the accommodation doesn't fundamentally alter the essential nature of the activity. So he said, there's a law that requires that the disabled be accommodated. I want to use a golf cart in the tournaments to ride from hole to hole. All right, let's see how you would rule. How many would rule in favor of the golfer and say he does have a right to a golf cart? Raise your hand. And how many would rule against him and say they don't have to give him a golf cart? A majority, it seems, would rule in his favor, but a sizable minority would rule against him. Why would you rule against him?
I think this will alter the condition for the other players, because I think I'm not knowing much about golf, but I still think that people have to walk a long distance, and if the golfers do get tired, that may affect their performance. So if I provide a golf cart, then you can say it causes an imbalance for other players.
Right, it's no longer, it's unfair to the others
Yes.
who have to walk.
So if
They may get tired.
Yes. So I feel that if I'm going to provide a golf cart, then the golf cart should be provided to all the players then.
Aha, so if he gets a golf cart, everyone should get a golf cart.
Yeah.
Well, that might be a solution. What about that? Would you favor that solution?
I mean, if it has to be brought about, then it has to be provided to all the players.
Right, I understand. All right, so that would be, what about that? Would that, how many would favor that solution? How many wouldn't? Who would not, who would simply say, no, he doesn't get one, nobody gets one. It's against the rules. All right, let's hear from someone who holds that view. Who would rule against him? Why? Why would you rule against him? He doesn't have a right to a golf cart. All right, speak up, say it. It changes the game, someone said. Stand up and tell us why.
The sports records are maintained over generations. And if you allow this kind of an evolution to happen, it it kind of renders many of those records meaningless.
So you wouldn't be able to compare the records of today's golfers with those of the golfers in the past.
That's right.
And that's reason enough to deprive an otherwise great golfer of an opportunity to play?
Right. I mean, for money, the money made by different blockbuster movies, you have inflation and various other indices to compare the performance of one collections against another in a different era.
So it would throw off the record keeping historically.
That's right. And sports is one thing that where we all unambiguously agree upon the rules before we play, right? So that it's not left to any interpretation as to who finished. There is no judgment involved there. It's you just play it. So it should be as black and white as possible.
Well, the rules were set, and then he came along and said, I should be accommodated because of a disability.
Well, somebody else could come and argue that my eyesight is not perfect. And with this eyesight, if I'm able to still make it, with whatever extra shots above the par, then, considering the disability with which I start, there is no end to this argument. Each person, what do you consider a disability at the first place, right? I mean, should it be above a threshold to be considered as a handicap, or if, somebody who wears glasses can then come and say, please keep the distance between the holes a little closer for me, because for my disability, that's good, right? And there's...
But they let golfers wear glasses.
Well, let's say I'm not strong enough and I get a certificate from the doctor that however hard you train and practice, you're not going to develop this kind of a muscle. It's just not in your DNA. So can I take that up and say that, hey, that person has an advantage over me, so please, I will compete against myself. I will not compete against the other players.
Well, I thought you were going to say, therefore, I need a heavier golf club to make the ball go farther, or something like that.
Probably.
And that, you would be against that?
Yeah, there is no end to this argument. I mean, one could keep on going on and on. You have to have a threshold and say, hey, if you are unfit to play golf, then don't try playing golf. Right.
Yeah, he said that if he has a disability, he shouldn't, or he should be given a handicap according to whatever the rules are. But it's like saying you want to play golf without one arm. So you don't have an arm, but you still want to play golf, and so you should be given a handicap and an advantage in favor of how many players? Around 100 players, just because you don't have an arm or you have an handicap like eyesight, and it doesn't make sense giving one person an advantage because of his handicap. And in the case of a golf cart, because of his handicap, he should be given next advantage, which he would be able to, that would make all the difference. He could.
So I want to make sure I understand how you voted. Did you vote to give him the golf cart or not to give it to him?
Not give him one.
Not to give him one. All right. We need to hear now from someone who would give him one. What do you say to the argument?
I'm one of those who supports the concept of providing a
All right, let's hear why.
Let's
hear why.
In all sports, there are exceptions made. For example, I'm sorry, I don't know if you are familiar with the game of cricket.
Cricket?
Even in cricket, when a player
I tried playing it once. I'm a baseball player, and the skills in baseball are not easily transferable to cricket. But I did try.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I don't think this rule applies in baseball. However, in cricket, if a batsman is injured, there is a runner provided, and the batsman can still carry on playing, staying at the crease. And coming back to golf, the most important thing is how many shots that you take to put the ball. I don't know if I'm using the right term there, putting the ball.
Yeah. How many shots does it take to get the ball in the hole?
Is it 3 shots or 4 shots?
Right.
As long as a man is able to do that, the distance from the last shot to the next one, if it travels by any means of transport, should not be considered as an obstacle.
Okay.
I think it should be allowed.
All right. So you're saying, look, what golf is really about is getting the ball into the hole in as few strokes as possible. That's the essence of golf, right? And if that's the case, then how you move around the course, whether you walk or ride, that's not essential to the game itself. That's not the virtue that we're testing. When players practice, they practice their shot. They don't practice walking from one hole to the next. So that's not the virtue that we're testing. Whereas people who have taken the other view, those who wouldn't give him the cart, seem to be saying, going back to the first observation, that walking the course is part of the game, the fatigue factor. It's tiring. And so it seems that deciding whether he has a right to a cart depends on what's essential to the game. What is the purpose or the point of golf? What virtues is it testing? Is it testing the virtue of being able to swing and get the ball in the hole? Or is it also testing the physical vigor that enables you to walk the course, maybe on a very hot day? Which actually connects with the flute example, if you think about it. And it also connects with Aristotle's theory of justice, which seems strange on the surface. That justice requires us to figure out the purpose or the point or the essential nature of the activity in question. So who should get the best flutes? The best flute player, because that's to be played well. That's the point, that's the purpose of musical performance. Should this golfer have a right to a golf cart? It depends on the purpose and the essential nature of golf. If the essential nature of golf is hitting the ball into the hole in a few strokes, then yeah, he should get it, because that's not essential. That's not the virtue that's being recognized and rewarded. But if physical effort is part of it, then no, we want to reward that virtue. We can't give him a cart. You know how the court decided, by the way? What do you think? They ruled in his favor. They said he had a right to a golf cart. And they did so by reasoning about the purpose of golf, the essential nature of golf. It seems strange to have justices reasoning about golf, looking into its history, asking what is its essential purpose. But the court opinion said the essential purpose of golf is and has always been hitting the ball, as this gentleman said, into the hole in as few strokes as possible, not walking the course. Now, they had asked early on in the trial, golfing greats of the past, Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, to come and testify. And they asked them, is the fatigue factor part of golf? What do you suppose they said? They said, yes, of course it is. It's interesting why they felt that he shouldn't have a golf cart. I think it's for a reason that connects with Aristotle's insight. Why would these golfing greats who had won tournaments, they were retired, they weren't even competing, why would they care that he not be given a cart? Oh, well, I should first, before I answer that, is there anyone here who's a golfer? You are? Anybody else? Over here? Well, not too many golfers here. I'm not a golfer. See, golfers, you'll forgive me, golfers are a little bit sensitive about the athletic status of their game. There's no running or jumping, and the ball stands still. Nobody doubts that golf is a game of skill, but so is billiards, so is pools, so is checkers, a game of skill. I suspect that those golfing greats felt they had a stake in golf being defined as a real sport rather than just a game of skill, because the honor and recognition accorded them for displaying the virtue of an athlete would be much greater if golf was seen as an athletic competition rather than just a game of skill. And this, in a way, is Aristotle's point. The reason that in deciding rights and deciding what's fair, we have to inquire into the purpose or the essential nature of the activity in question, whether it's flutes or golf or education, whatever it may be, is that only by doing that can we determine what virtues are worthy of honor and recognition. The golfing greats of the past want to be considered, recognized, honored in the same kind of way that Michael Jordan is, the best basketball player, not in the way that the best billiard player, we don't even know who it is honored. Now, flutes and golf, these may strike you as trivial illustrations of Aristotle's theory of justice. Consider one last example. Education. Access to university. What about the issue of reservations, affirmative action? Should university seats be allocated only on the basis of academic merit as measured by test scores and grades? Or should some places be reserved for those who come from disadvantaged backgrounds? Now, let's just take, now we're edging up not to a fanciful example, but to one right at the heart of debates that are going on in your society and mine. Let's take a quick poll on this question. How many are in favor, thinking about education, university admissions? How many are in favor of affirmative action or a system of reservations? Raise your hand. And how many are not? How many think that's unfair? All right, there's a pretty good division of opinion on this question. Now, let's see if we can quickly get the main arguments on both sides. Let's first hear from someone who thinks it's unfair to have any quotas and only academic qualifications should count. Who will quickly tell us why he or she holds that view? Yes.
I think it should be absolutely on the merit and because if somebody has a zeal of studying, whatever caste they belong, they will still go ahead and study. So I think it would be totally unfair to provide a seat in the university on the basis of caste or religion, for that matter.
All right, and why is it unfair to let caste be a factor rather than academic qualifications? Why is it unfair?
Because if somebody belonging to the low caste still have a zeal to study, will go ahead and study, will find a way to fund themselves to study right from the primary schooling to the graduation schooling and probably finding a seat in a university.
Okay, good. Who else? Thank you. Who else holds that view? Go ahead. Yeah.
I have two main problems with the whole caste thing. First of all, the education system itself is a meritocracy. So you have to work hard to get into college, it's understood. And secondly, we find so many divisions in the world, such as society itself has so many divisions in it. Why do we have to make the education system even more divided with castes and systems like that? Shouldn't it only be on the basis of merit and stuff and how much you actually know?
It should, you think it should be on the basis of merit.
Only on merit, nothing else.
Merit and nothing else.
Yeah.
Because?
Because it will cause even more division within the education
system. Because it will cause division.
Yep.
To consider caste. Who's on the other side and can give us a reason? Go ahead. All right, in the balcony.
Sir, I'm against any reservation, and that is because giving a reservation is not just about giving seats to the deprived or the ones who are not getting it. It's about a long-term thing in which if a person who does not have a real motive or a real passion to do something, then he may end up using somebody's seat who may do great things if he would have got it. So it's not just about present, it's about the future of people who are really passionate about doing something.
All right, so if someone gets a seat through a quota and doesn't have passion for learning, he or she may deprive someone else of a seat who would make better use of it and who would go on to do great things. So that's a kind of a utilitarian argument, going back to the different theories of justice. The greater good is served, you think, if only those with academic high qualifications go to university?
So it's not just about the greater good of the people who are passionate. I can give an example about it. There were like firefighters, and one of them died because of negligence of other firefighter because he was not so good at what he was doing. And that was because he was on quota. And there is also a phrase where people say best man for the job. And best man for the job can only come when reservations are not allowed, rather than people have an opportunity of fighting equally.
Okay, I hear it, but it does sound like, to me, like an argument in the name of the greatest good, the greatest service to the fire company, the fire unit, fire department, or the greatest contribution, having received the education. So there is a utilitarian argument in the name of the ability to contribute to the welfare of society. I want to hear from someone on the other side.
Yeah, I am here for the reservation.
Someone, all right, where are you?
Balcony last.
All right.
Here.
Yes, okay, tell us why.
Okay, the people from the disbanded quotas or whatever it is, they don't have the proper facilities that they are supposed to be provided, and the rest of the other quota people who have the facilities to perform better, to showcase their skills, they are being exposed to various things which they can learn from. For basic, the internet, whatever, the people from the other castes are able to view through it, Google through it, provide their assignments. The basic things is not provided to the disbanded quota people. So they are not able to come up in life. So if at all they are given all those facilities and they are able to perform better, then there is no use of the reservation. But since it's not there, I think the reservation is better for them to come up in life.
All right, so not everyone has the same access to an educational background and other advantages in life. One more argument in favor from someone who's in favor.
Hello, sir.
All right, we'll go, yes, go ahead.
We need inclusive growth, and for that we need that all the sections of the society should develop. If we keep the survival of the fittest kind of thing, then we are being cold to the disadvantaged sections of the society.
Okay, thank you. One more defender. Is there a reason that hasn't been given yet in favor? We've heard arguments in favor of the general welfare, for and against. We've heard arguments about remedying the effects of educational disadvantage. Is there anyone who to bring us back to this theme? Just a minute. Is there anyone, I want to hear if there's someone who wants to connect the debate about reservations in education. Wait. Who wants to connect that with the reasoning? Now, this is a hard question, so don't answer too quickly. Who wants to connect the case for or against reservations in university admission with the principle that we've been discussing from Aristotle that says you can only decide what's fair or where rights lie by first reasoning about the purpose or the point or the essential nature of the activity in question. Who can connect? Who can connect?
Yeah, I can.
All right, let's hear.
Yeah, so...
what's the connection?
See, the thing in India is you have to realize when it's reservation, usually it's always caste and creed. Now, if I talk about income level, what would you say? If someone comes from a poverty-stricken family, that person, does he not deserve to study in a better university like you guys do, or I do, or anyone else does, just because he comes from a lower income level? I'll correlate this with the golf example. In golf, what did we agree, majority of us, that the basic concept of playing golf is you get the ball in the hole in as many shots as you can. The way you walk...
That's how I would play golf.
Yeah.
As many shots. Right, but anyhow, I know what you mean. In as few shots. Go ahead.
Okay, so in as few shots. So the way, how you walk and all that does not matter. That was what was decided. Same thing with education, right? Now, a person who comes from a poverty-stricken family, that person didn't have all the facilities that another normal person would. And so he couldn't perform to that level. He probably needs a push. And it's the same thing with sports. I don't want to be insensitive, but why do we have sports for the physically handicapped? Because there, some of the skills that are required, they can't do it like a normal person does. So everyone is put on the same pedestal, and all physically handicapped people are together, put in that competition, and they play. So there, the skills that you require, you need strength. So someone who's physically handicapped can't compete with someone who's normal. So he's put with people who don't have strength like him, of the same level probably, and that's how they compete.
Right, so you're suggesting that the golfer who's handicapped can play in the Special Olympics?
No. I'm saying that was fine, because in golf, what are the skills required? Your eyesight, the way you hit the ball, and how you measure the breeze and the air, right? That is what is probably quantified in golf, not how far you can walk or how long you can walk.
Right.
So then it's fine.
All right, so it's fine. So you would have given him the cart?
Yeah, I would have.
But you would not give the reservations based on caste?
No, you have to realize...
Would or would not?
I would caste and income level also, not just caste. In India,
Caste
it's all over...
and income level. All right.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can draw some... I know there are a lot of people who have further thoughts about this, but let me see if I can draw some connections among the various stories and cases and examples and arguments that we've had.
Excuse me, sir. Sorry to interrupt you. The
No,
connection...
we've got two different people talking.
Yes. So the connection is, Aristotle believed that only the person who deserves should get an opportunity, and that will be the best utilitarian thing that will be around. My point to that is, Aristotle lived 2 millennia ago when people were not, the population was not so much. There were opportunities for people to go ahead and do things what they really wanted. So if someone wanted to get into the world of academia, it wasn't so difficult, considering that we've got other factors that have grown over a period of time.
Right.
We have to understand that...
All right, fair enough. All right, I hear that point. It's true, Aristotle lived a long time ago, and maybe he didn't have an insight into all of the problems we have. In fact, I suspect that Aristotle may not even have been a golfer or even know about golf. But here's what I would like to suggest. What's interesting about and compelling about reading philosophy, whether the philosopher lived thousands of years ago, whether that philosopher was in the Western tradition as Aristotle was or in the Eastern tradition, or whether the philosopher wrote 100 years ago or 50 years ago or today, what philosophers offer are arguments, and not only arguments and principles, but also ways of thinking about ethics, about the right thing to do, ways of thinking about the good life. And the ways of thinking that these philosophers present, the important ones, the interesting ones, the compelling ones anyhow, the ways of thinking they present, actually inform our thinking even today, even if we haven't read those philosophers. So that when we give our reactions to hypothetical questions like the trolley car and whether you would push, and when we give our views on seemingly simple questions, like who should get the best flute, or should the golfer get a golf cart, and even when we debate controversial questions right at the center of public life, like reservations, when we make those judgments and when we make those arguments, we rely implicitly on principles and thinking that implicate us in what those philosophers were writing about. When we argue about the justice or injustice of reservations in university admission, if you think about it, lying behind those arguments are competing ideas about what the purpose of university education really is. And some people believe that the purpose of a university education is to promote scholarly and academic and scientific excellence. Others believe the purpose of a university education is to promote academic excellence, to be sure, but also to create leaders of a diverse society. And if you believe that the first purpose is primary, or the sole purpose, then you're likely to oppose reservations. And if you think the purpose or the point or the telos of university education is the second, academic but also civic, creating leaders of a diverse society, then you're likely to be sympathetic to the idea of reservations. And if that's right, then Aristotle, though he lived 2,000 years ago, before golf, had a point that reasoning about justice and rights and fairness and the right thing to do requires thinking through and sometimes arguing about the purpose, the point, the nature, the ends that social institutions like universities properly pursue. And the way we resolve those questions will decide whom we admit and also what virtues we as a society want to honor and reward. So in the brief time that we've spent together, we've been reasoning together, sometimes in a bit of a cacophony, but democracy is like that. Democratic argument is like that. It's not always neat and tidy. And philosophy lectures that engage in discussion and explore these questions also have a slightly unruly character. That's been true ever since Socrates went around Athens and started engaging people in questioning the laws by which they lived, asking, are those laws just? People argued. An argument began. But they soon realized as the argument went on that the argument led to certain bigger principles, ways of thinking about justice and the good life. And that, in a small way, is what we've been doing here. And what we've discovered as we've been engaging in these arguments are at least three traditions of justice, three ways of thinking about justice. One, greatest happiness for the greatest number of people, the utilitarian way. Two, respecting certain fundamental rights and duties regardless of the numbers. And three, reasoning from the purpose or the point of social institutions to figure out what virtues are worthy of honor and reward. Why should we bother with abstract questions like these, questions of philosophy? Why should we take up the subject? My answer, and what I think our discussion has shown, is this. It's not that we need really to be persuaded to take up philosophy as a subject We all of us, already do it to some degree or another. Every judgment we make, every answer we give to a hard ethical dilemma, every position we take on a public question, every choice we make in our families or in our personal lives of ethical import commits us, implicates us, even though we may not realize it, to one or another philosophical conception or philosophical principle. And my suggestion is that our public life would go better, I think, in all of our societies, if we did a better job of arguing, conducting our political discourse in a way that engaged more directly and more explicitly with the big questions of philosophy, the principles of justice, the conceptions of the common life, and the question of what makes a good life, if we engage with those more explicitly rather than less. Not because that will lead us all to agree. Democracy ultimately is not about agreement, but because I think it would lead to a better way of conducting our political discourse, and it would lead to a healthier, richer democratic life. All of which is to suggest that to be a democratic citizen, to take that job seriously, is also to be something of a philosopher. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.